Some people say that this is a movie with a rich sense of humor. The director used 17 tons of fish and animal corpses to drown the whole street. He even invited thousands of men and women to the end of the movie to perform the famous scene of a million bananas. What I am most confused about is that the core of the whole film is obviously perfume, but it makes people feel the endless smoke. When I mentioned this film, the vast majority of people thought it was just a large-scale comedy, because it played the biggest romantic scene in film history. However, although the film was classified as a limited series, the shock it brought was enough to make people faint. The movie I recommend to you today is Perfume. Paris, in 1738, was not romantic at all. Garbage was everywhere in the city, and the plague was rampant. The citizens would clear the toilet waste directly from the second floor to the street. The whole of Paris was full of the smell of malice. And next to the fish pond, which was full of fishy and rotten smell, a woman was lying on the ground in a painful expression. She was panting hard, hoping that the fifth child would be born with a splash of water, because the first few times were dead. She had no hope for this birth. She just picked up the shark knife blindly and cut off the expectations of the new life. The poor little girl was thrown into the garbage dump before she could see the world. However, this unloved baby had a strong vitality. Although her eyes had not yet opened, she had lighted up this dirty world through the smell. The fishy smell, the rotten smell, the smell of garbage, and all kinds of odors filled her nose. After a while, she opened her eyes and made a displeased cry. People around her heard it. From the gap in her eyes, they saw this newborn baby, and her mother was sent on a death row because of this cry. So when Grady was born, she became an orphan. The orphanage is where the orphanage is. But the weak and innocent her was excluded by other children from coming here. She was almost killed by them in the cradle. Fortunately, the dean stopped her in time and let her pick up this life again. When she was about 5 years old, she still couldn't speak, but her nose was extremely sensitive.
Not only could it show the unique smell of everyone, but it could also identify food by its taste. Even in the canteen, a few meters away, she could identify the eggs of frogs. Unfortunately, this talent didn't become her salvation. When she was 13 years old, the dean gave her a low price as if she was selling livestock. However, when the dean left with the money, she was strangled by a few robbers. This seems to imply that anyone who abandons her is destined to die. At that time, the life expectancy of Parisians was no more than 35 to 40 years. But at the bottom of society, she was a miracle-like adult. By chance, she followed the leathermaker to the bustling town. This is when she began to realize that the smell could be so rich, her feet were unstable, and her nose was slightly moving. At first it was just a careful test, and then it was like an out-of-control wind. It was an instinctive, uncontrollable excitement. As if every cell in her body had become a sense of smell. She was eager to catch the smell of money in the air, the smell of bread, the thick lip of cheese, the deep hair oil, the fragrance of the rich woman. She was so intoxicated that she could not pull herself out. Her face was full of shock and greed. In case of emergency, she seemed to be bewitched and went to a perfume shop involuntarily. At that time, most of the nobles in Europe were lazy to bathe, so that they could only use perfume to cover their noses. And the rich women in this shop were lining up to buy the country's love rainforest. With a light drop, the faint fragrance circled in the shop. Found out sharply that the fragrance that really moved him was not the ordinary one in the shop. He tried to look for it again, but in the end, he fell in love with the girl, not far away. He was addicted to the fragrance on the other person's body, and followed her everywhere. He was greedy. He thought this was the beginning of love, but he did not expect it was the beginning of a nightmare. In order not to be discovered by the passers-by, he covered the girl's nose with his hand. It was this hasty dance that caused a tragedy. The girl soon fainted. The scent of the sinner also disappeared with her breath. For a while, did not know what to do. This kind of fear of not knowing what to do is not the fear of killing, but the fear that the beautiful scent in his heart would disappear. So he took off the girl's clothes and gently touched her skin. The remaining body odor was sucked into his nostrils. It seemed that this was the only way to ease the inner suffering. At midnight, could not sleep. His heart was filled with unprecedented emptiness. He recalled the scent of the girl again and suddenly understood why he had lived so hard for so many years. All the sufferings of the past became a ladder to understand. He clearly realized at this moment that the meaning and goal of his existence was to learn how to preserve the smell of the human body. However, as an ordinary worker, Perfume was compliant until he found an auto-stock perfume shop for 44 de Bosbardini here for 45. Had also developed a few types of crazy scenery for 47, but an Ooling's sudden appearance for 49 made him fall to the bottom of the valley for 51. Although he was always familiar with 452, the damage to an appearance, he actually secretly studied the formula and tried to use the reverse to get back up. However, he failed repeatedly. It was only when appeared that he brought a turning point to this dilemma. With Amora and Psyche, by What if I gave you the absurd idea I would use someone else's perfume? It's all over you. It's on your forehead, your nose, your hands. It's bad. Amora and Psyche is master. There's too much rosemary in it, and too much of that. He said he had the most sensitive nose in Paris. He could tell the taste of the whole world. So, in the eyes of the perfumer, He hastily mixed Amore and Psyche. He did not care about the traditional way of making perfumes. He just poured the spices he chose into the container, one by one. The action was casual and rough. The perfumer looked at him with a straight face. But after opening the lid, it was really this smell. "That is not a good perfume, master. If you let me again, master, I'll make it more better." He poured a pile of spices one by one. But when he was about to finish the test, the perfumer suddenly changed his face and drove him out. He was confused. How could he know that this seemingly rude behavior of the perfumer was actually defending his last bit of dignity? His inner struggle was no match for curiosity. The perfumer finally opened the bottle of perfume. Just for a moment, his whole body was occupied by this scent. It was as if he had entered a wonderful world that was isolated from the world. Although he did not want to admit it, he had to say that Gray was really a perfumer genius. Early in the morning, the perfumer hurried to the leather factory and bought this box of Yao Qian Shu from the boss at a price of 10 times